It was beautiful. Beautiful. Normally, I would never say stop. I mean, you don't even have to stop. I can't even ask you to stop. That's brilliant. But, I mean, if you're around at 5 o'clock, man, I'd like to talk to you some more.
I got something at 5.
Do you?
Yeah. I'm around a lot, though.
Are you?
Yeah.
Sweet. I'm here Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3:30 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, Zav, I can't get the auxiliary to come on here.
Okay, let me come over. Touch you. I want to see if you get a level. Okay, you got that.
Yeah, I got a level.
Ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here. You are obsolete, Mr. Wordsworth. You have no function, Mr. Wordsworth. You're an anachronism, like a ghost from another time.
I am nothing more than a reminder to you that you cannot destroy truth.
You're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth, a crawling insect. An ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here, no meaning.
I am a human being. I exist. And if I speak one thought out loud, that thought exists, even after I'm shoveled into my grave.
Delusions, Mr. Wordsworth. Delusions, the Bible, poetry, essays, all kinds, all of it illuminate to make you think you have a strength when you have no strength at all. You have nothing but spindly limbs and a dream, and the state has no use for your kind.
Yeah? Well, we're gonna have to do something about that. This is RiverWestRadio.com, community-supported radio streaming live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm your host. My name is Michael Wordsworth, and welcome to Breaking Down the News, the show that presents the news highlights of the week, but with a twist. Breaking Down the News is more concerned in bringing you information that wasn't covered on the front pages. Headlines you don't want to miss, because not listening could be dangerous to your freedom, liberty, and health. And good afternoon. I'm Michael Wordsworth with Wordsworth Listening To. Today's episode is incredibly exciting. We have Dr. Paul Connett on the line for an interview today. It's June 4th, May 2012. Welcome. Today's topic, fluoridation in Milwaukee's water, fluoridation across the country. The case against fluoridation is based on scientific facts, while the only argument supporting fluorosilicic acid being added to our drinking water comes from fanatical propaganda writers and the poor minds that subscribe to this massive lie. The fluoridation issue can be broken down into one simple question, and that question is this. Will we continue to believe that a toxic sedative that attacks every cell and organ in the body is beneficial to teeth? I'm very proud to present our guest on today's show. Dr. Connett supported Alderman Bull last week when together they confronted the opposition at City Hall. Dr. Paul Connett is a graduate of Cambridge University and holds a PhD in chemistry from Dartmouth College. Since 1983, he taught chemistry at St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York, where he specialized in environmental chemistry and toxicology. He is retired since May 2006, but over the past 27 years, his research on waste management has taken him to 49 states in the U.S. and 50 other countries, where he has given over 2,000 pro bono public presentations. Ralph Nader himself said of Paul Connett, he's the only person I know who can make waste interesting. Dr. Conant is the leading expert on this topic, the leading expert in the nation, if not the world, and we at River West Radio are very proud to have him here. Welcome, Dr. Paul Conant.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me on the program.
Yes, sir. We are anxious to hear what you have to say in Milwaukee. We'd like to, so many people wanted to pass on their appreciation and thanks to you for showing up personally at our City Hall and assisting Alderman Bohl in this great crusade.
Well, I was happy to do it, and I was happy to be part of a pretty heavy-hitting threesome with Dr. Bill Osmondson, a dentist from Oregon who I've worked with for a number of years, and more recently Dr. Yolanda White, a pediatrician from Atlanta, Georgia. So between the three of us, a dentist, a doctor, pediatrician, and a scientist, I think we hit quite a number of bases.
Indeed, the Milwaukee Journal didn't do a very good job of giving you coverage, though. I'm sure you read the article that Alderman Bohl wrote. Very, very good.
Yeah, I thought his article was excellent. I thought the coverage of the hearing was pretty good, but I was very disappointed with the editorial, especially describing my evidence as anecdotal. I find it extraordinary that you can do 16 years of research on an issue and publish a book with two other scientists with every single argument backed up with references to the scientific literature, and then have journalists who, I don't know how long they've studied the issue, but to dismiss my evidence as anecdotal, when a great deal of the information that supports fluoridation, unfortunately, is anecdotal from dentists. It was a bit of a shock and a disappointment. I think that's rather superficial judgment on their part, and it didn't serve the citizens of Milwaukee very well. But other things have been good. I think the TV coverage was fairly good, and as I said, the article was fairly good, and Jim Bohl's leadership in this issue, plus that editorial of his own, was excellent.
Well, clearly they were attempting to minimize you and the issue by merely blowing this off as anecdotal. But one thing I thought was interesting was the opinion article written by the Milwaukee Journal that was against Alderman Bohl's position. It had no authorship. I looked all over the page, and I could not find one person to stand behind what they were saying. It was just this collective, we do not accept the current opposition, and we think that it's safe. And they did mention, though, that you showed up with a binder with 2.5 inches thick worth of material, and I thought that, wait, is that supposed to be against him? Because the reason you showed up with that binder was you could. There's that much documented evidence. I'm sure you could have showed up with a 2-foot thick folder.
Yeah, I just wish, Michael, that at some point we had a judge and jury on this that would allow full presentations, maybe a day each, from both sides, and an examination of the references they bring to bear, and then make a judgment. But we have no judge and jury in this country on issues like this. I'm afraid all the regulatory agencies on this matter are asleep. The FDA has never regulated fluoride for ingestion, and stand by while over 180 million Americans each day are being given this medicine, which they refuse to regulate. We have the EPA has now spent 6 years and is yet to lower the safe drinking water standard for fluoride, which is currently set at 4 parts per million, even though they paid the National Research Council to review the literature. And the National Research Council, for once a balanced panel, did an excellent job and came back and said the current safe drinking water standard is not protective of health and needs to be lowered, and you need to do a health risk assessment. As I say, 6 years later, they still haven't completed that. And meanwhile, we have the CDC having full reign to run around the country promoting fluoridation, everybody thinking that it's the full big 20,000 people or whatever the number of employees are of this huge federal agency down in Atlanta, Georgia. And making statements as if it was the full agency, when in fact the only entity that is aggressively promoting this practice in the United States is the Oral Health Division of the CDC, which is only 30 people. And
really?
They are dentally trained, not medically trained. They don't have amongst them any certification in toxicology or specialized areas of medicine. And yet they're telling the country that fluoridation is one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century. And unfortunately, that's where most people stop. If you get a superficial treatment by a journalist or a politician or a health spokesperson, and they simply quote one sentence from each side, and the quote from the pro-fluoridation side is the Center for Disease Control says that fluoridation is one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century, without probing any further. And then the quote from the other side is Congressman this or Mrs. Clutterbuck or Professor this says, one sentence.
Right.
They think that's good journalism. Of course, it isn't good journalism. They should got to go below the surface. And I've got to admit, I've got to plead guilty here, Michael, because 16 years ago, I was walking around thinking that the people opposed to fluoridation are a bunch of flakes, flat Earth society, crazy people like Dr. Strangelove in that movie.
I see.
And that there's nothing wrong with fluoridation, and everybody says it's okay, blah, 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 blah. And then my wife, one afternoon, persuaded me to actually read a few scientific articles, and I was absolutely shocked and, of course, embarrassed that I, as a scientist, had been walking around, A, thinking that this was perfectly safe, and B, thinking that the people opposed to fluoridation were Looney Tunes. It was very embarrassing. And, one has tried to apologize ever since for those scientists out there long before I came along who fought to get common sense and good science to prevail against very powerful political entities like the U.S. government.
But, sir,
this issue.
What was it that made you? Many people, very few people have your background in toxicology, but other dentists, other doctors surely have looked into this issue. What was it that made you not turn tail and run? How did you find the courage to face this horrible lie and take action?
Well, first of all, of course, I was apprehensive, because I knew enough to realize that if I came out against fluoridation, I would be stigmatized.
Indeed.
I would be immediately perceived as being Looney Tunes myself. And so I wasn't anxious to do it. But when I started reading the literature, I must say that what I thought had happened with nothing to back it up, but what I thought had happened is that those poor, crazy anti-fluoridation people had confused the element fluorine with the compound fluoride. Now, when elements combine, they form compounds. Now, in the case of fluorine, you're dealing with the most reactive, the most aggressive element in the periodic table. And if someone was putting that in the water, it would be ridiculous. But fluoride, I thought, well, that's the equivalent to sodium chloride. Compare that with chlorine. Everybody knows that chlorine is a very reactive gas, a very poisonous gas, used in World War I to actually kill people.
Well, now,
on the one hand, you've got chlorine, the nasty, aggressive element, and on the other hand, when it combines with another element to form a compound, that compound is pretty benign, i.e. sodium chloride, common salt.
I see. Yes, sodium chloride.
But the thing with the fluoride is that whilst it is unreactive chemically, it is extremely active biologically.
Indeed.
And that's when I got alarmed. When I saw the biochemistry of fluoride, when I saw that fluoride inhibited enzymes, when I saw that fluoride interfered with G proteins, which are very important in getting messages across membranes, when I saw that it interacted with all the metal ions that we need to do good things in the body, when I saw it was interfering with hydrogen bonds, which are at the heart of the functioning of biochemistry, I became alarmed. And in fact, there's an interesting bit of history here. Wisconsin was one of the early battlegrounds for fluoridation.
Really?
In the 50s. Yes, you had two very aggressive dentists. One was a guy called Frisch, who went around to each community in Wisconsin pushing fluoridation. And you had Frank Bull, who was the dental director of Wisconsin at the time, and he was also equally aggressive pushing fluoridation and was one of the people that twisted the arm of the U.S. Public Health Service to endorse fluoridation in 1950.
Well, now
which is a peculiar thing to do since none of the trials have been completed, but that's another story.
But who's
so here you have these aggressive dentists and regulators pushing fluoridation in Wisconsin. The first opponents were biochemists at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. They were opposed to fluoridation because they knew that fluoride was being used in biochemical experiments at that time to inhibit enzymes. And they felt it was crazy, like I do now, to introduce this stuff into the human body.
Indeed.
And I should say this. Speaking from a biochemical point of view, fluoridation is sheer lunacy. It just doesn't make sense. First of all, there's not one single biological or biochemical process in the human body that needs fluoride.
Not one.
Digest that for a moment. There's not one process in the body that needs fluoride to function. Okay, where we can function completely well without fluoride. You can have perfectly good teeth without fluoride. Nobody has ever shown that fluoride is an essential nutrient, that we need to swallow it to do something for our baby's development or our development or anybody's development. None. On the other hand, there are many, as I've already indicated, there are many processes in the body that are harmed by fluoride, given a sufficient concentration. Now, we could argue till the cows come home between the two sides as to whether we reach those concentrations that cause harm. I believe that we do, but the pros do not. But that's a separate argument. I mean, just look at it and take it at its face value. You don't need to swallow fluoride. It doesn't do any good to swallow fluoride.
What about topically?
Even the promoters now admit that it works topically. It works on the surface of the teeth, not from inside the body, but on the surface of the teeth. And at that point, anybody with an ounce of common sense should surely say, look, if it works on the outside of the teeth, and we've got fluoridated toothpaste, brush it on your teeth and spit out this toxic substance. This way, you solve both the medical problem and the ethical problem. You solve the medical problem because you avoid exposing every tissue in the body to this toxic substance, and you solve the ethical problem because you're not being forced to force a medicine on people that don't want it. By now, there are probably several hundred, maybe several thousand people in Milwaukee who have started to read the literature, started to go to our webpage, fluoridealert.org. There may be one or two that have even read our book, The Case Against Fluoride, and have decided that they don't want it. But this government, at the moment, is saying, no, you've got to have it, and thereby violating a very important medical principle, which is the principle that a patient needs informed consent before they accept medication. You cannot force medication on an individual. A doctor cannot. So what is happening in Milwaukee and hundreds of other cities in the United States, but very few cities around the world, there's only a few countries that fluoridate, but in those countries that do, you're allowing governments to do to everyone what a doctor can do to no one, namely force medication on them. And they say, oh, we're not forcing it on anybody. You're not forced to drink the water. Wait a moment. If you're in low income, you are certainly forced to drink the water from the tap. You don't have enough money if you're on a low income to get reverse osmosis or distill your water or buy bottled water for everything that you need. And that's particularly alarming when we're talking about bottle feeding babies.
Did you say that fluoride is classified now as a medicine by the FDA or ADA?
Well, you know, they play semantics. They play semantics. The simple fact is the definition of a medicine in most places is a substance used to prevent or treat disease.
Yes.
Well, the purpose of fluoridation is to treat and prevent dental decay. So the moment that is stated as a purpose, then there's no question that fluoride is being used as a medicine, and the public water supply is now being used to deliver medication, and therefore it is.
The FDA never approved it, correct?
No, the FDA has never approved fluoridation. They shunted that off to the EPA, but the EPA only regulates contaminants, not additives.
Right, it has to kill you for them to regulate
additive.
it. It has to be toxic in order for the FDA to actually regulate something, correct? The substance itself has to be toxic?
Well, FDA is supposed to be regulating drugs. FDA is supposed to be regulating drugs. Anything that's used to treat medicine or any medical practice is regulated by the FDA. The EPA regulates contaminants, toxic substances in the drinking water, which may be there naturally, like arsenic is there often naturally, or it may be an industrial pollutant. But that's their job, to keep the water safe. They've got nothing to do with the notion of using the public water supply to deliver medicine, which is a daft idea. Think about it.
Yes.
It's a daft idea because once you take that approach of using the public water supply to deliver medicine, there's two things you can't control. You can't control the dose. That's how much fluoride people get, because you can't control either how much water they drink or the fluoride they get from other sources.
I see, yes.
And secondly, so you can't control the dose, and the second thing is you can't control who gets it. Once you put it into the water, it goes to everybody. It means it goes to people that are very young, bottle-fed babies. It goes to infants. It goes to children. It goes to elderly people. It goes to sick people. It goes to people with poor nutrition. It goes to people with poor kidney function who can't get rid of the fluoride accumulating in their bones. So, I mean, you ask any pharmacist in the world, is there any substance used in medicine in your store that you can say to people, you don't have to control the dose of this. Take as much as you like, whenever you like. Drink it with every glass of water that you drink. Have some of this medicine. And secondly, you can give this to anybody. You can give this to anybody in your family, this drug.
That would never happen.
There's no other drug like that. And in fact, this is such a preposterous idea that we've never done this with any other medicine. There was, but let me back up. There was a short experiment in the 1930s where they used the public water supply to deliver iodine, because there are a lot of people with iodine deficiency.
Even today.
But the difference in iodine and fluoride is that iodine is a known nutrient, and if you don't have enough of it, you develop, goiter and the thyroid dysfunction and so on. And so there was huge justification in this particular case, but even that experiment failed because some people got too much iodine and came down with hypothyroidism. It reflects the fact that you can't control the dose. And it also reflects another thing, which is there's a huge range of sensitivity in the human population in response to any pharmacologically active substance, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether it's a drug or whether it's a poison. You're going to find a huge range of sensitivity in the population. And then that's another reason why you don't use the public water supply, or shouldn't, to deliver medicine.
Should it be by prescription only if this is the case? Should they require prescription?
Absolutely. If you're talking about swallowing fluoride, first of all, no one should swallow fluoride. As I said before, it's a silly thing to do because there's no known value to swallowing it. It doesn't do any good to any process in the body. It can only do harm. And if the purpose, the main predominant action of fluoride, it works topically on the teeth.
Yes.
And you've got toothpaste with fluoride in it, which you can brush on your teeth and then spit it out. It makes absolutely no sense to swallow it at all. So there's no need. Look, if they did let's, for sake of argument, Michael, let's say right now that they prevailed and persuaded us that it was important for people to actually swallow fluoride.
Okay.
Not brush on the teeth, but swallow it.
Gotcha.
Now, supposing that argument prevailed, and they said, now let's discuss the best way of doing that, the best way of getting people to swallow fluoride. I would say, well, don't put it in the drinking water and distribute it willy-nilly across the population. Put it into bottles. Let's have bottled fluoridated water and make that freely available in supermarkets and pharmacies, and if necessary, make it free for people for low income. Now, this way you solve three problems. One, you can use pharmaceutical-grade fluoride if you're dealing with a much smaller quantity of fluoride that's needed, because 99% of the tap water doesn't go anywhere near anybody's teeth. It goes down the drain, washing cars and flushing the toilet, bathing and so on.
Yes, yes.
So 99% is wasted. But if you used, and you wouldn't be able to use pharmaceutical grade for fluoridating the general water supply, but you could use pharmaceutical grade if you were making up bottled water, which is what is actually happening. That is available.
Yes.
But secondly, you could also control the dose, because you could make it very, very clear. Only drink 1 liter or 1 bottle of this a day, and all the rest of the water that you drink and cook with and bathe with get from the tap, so you can control the dose.
Right.
Or you have a good shot at controlling the dose. And thirdly, you're not forcing it on people that don't want it. So if someone doesn't want to swallow fluoride, go and get it. You don't have to buy or get that bottled water from the supermarket.
You know, it's incredible. One thing I wanted to mention when you were speaking earlier is one of the reasons why they don't want to look at this, at the actual evidence, is because then the public would bring this, it would be in the light. They would be able to actually see the evidence, and it seems like the strongest case that the opposition has is to just keep this issue in the dark and let the propaganda prevail.
Yep. They've had two strategies for many, many years now. One is to win the argument with authority. And this comes through mostly with endorsements. They will give you a long list, about 100 organizations that endorse fluoridation, big ones and small ones and so on. And you're meant to be really impressed with these endorsements. I mean, if all these organizations, the World Health Organization, the CDC, et cetera,
well, right.
if they endorse fluoridation, who am I to disagree with it? So that's one strategy. And the second strategy is to absolutely ridicule opponents using the movie Dr. Strangelove, etc., to make us look like Looney Tunes. And that ridicule serves two purposes. One, it keeps people away from the issue, but also it makes dentists and doctors and scientists like myself reluctant to come out in public against it. You don't want to be insulted in this way, ridiculed in this way. Nobody likes to be embarrassed. Nobody likes to be made to look a fool in public. And they use that. So these two strategies, then, are to keep the run-of-the-mill dentists and doctors and scientists away from the literature. And the reason that fluoridation is going to end within the next few years, in my opinion, is because of Internet and because of perhaps radio programs like your own, which force the issue out, even though the mainstream media is doing a lousy job of actually investigating the issue. The science is all there now. In fact, right now, the Fluoride Action Network is translating a number of very important health studies from China in particular. China, where there's a huge amount of research going on. They don't do the research in the United States. There's very little studies done on other tissues than the teeth. All the studies are teeth. If you want to study teeth, you can get all the money in the world to study teeth, whether it's dental decay or dental fluorosis or whatever. As long as it's teeth, you can get the money to do it. But if you are interested in what fluoride does to the bones, what it does to the brains, what it does to the endocrine system, what it does to the kidney, what it does to the reproductive system, what it does to the immune system, forget it. The government agencies are not willing to fund those studies from independent people.
Well,
and if if they're forced because of certain notoriety of an issue like the cancer issue, if they're forced eventually to do some studies, what do? They give it to a dental school. They give it to a professor of dentistry who's known to be pro-fluoridation. They did this with osteosarcoma. I mean, there's a real concern here that fluoride may be causing osteosarcoma in young boys, young men.
Did that show up before?
There's been animal studies, a couple of epidemiological studies that have found this, some that haven't. So what does the NIH do? They give a lot of money to a professor of dentistry at Harvard to do a study, knowing full well that professor was very pro-fluoridation and also was a consultant for Colgate, that obviously has an axe to grind. I mean, their sales of fluoridated products would really hit the basement if it was found that small amounts of fluoride were contributing to osteosarcoma, which is a frequently fatal bone cancer.
Do you know?
So, to add one layer of bizarreness to bizarreness, we have the fact that fluoridation may actually be killing a few young men in the United States each year, and yet the research was given over to a dental school.
Killing a few young... Now, before 1950s, was this the case before fluoride hit the water? Did we see these cases popping up in the young people?
No, it's a very rare cancer. I think there's only about 400 cases of osteosarcoma in young men in the United States each year. So it's a very rare cancer, but of course a very significant one if you're one of the rare cases, because it's, as I said, it's frequently fatal, and if it's not fatal, you lose a limb or two in an effort to cure it. And I must complete the story because it's quite disturbing.
Please do.
And in a way, I guess it's also a positive, because one of Professor Chester Douglas, this is the professor in question at Harvard, one of his graduate students did do an excellent study. Despite Douglas's bias, she obviously had an open mind, and she did a study, and she used a different approach from anybody else. She found that young boys, if they were exposed to fluoridated water, 1 part per million, they're exposed to fluoridated water in their 6th, 7th, or 8th years, which corresponds to the mid-childhood growth spurt. So they're exposed in this short period of time, 6, 7, and 8. They had a 5 to 7-fold increased risk of succumbing to osteosarcoma. Now,
horrible.
as I say, it's quite remarkable that this is a graduate student at Harvard who was actually a dentist. Her name is Elise Bassin. And then that's the science. Now look at the politics. The politics is that Chester Douglas, the professor who signed her thesis for 3 years, didn't tell people that she'd found that. He went to England and told the British Fluoridation Society exactly what they wanted to hear, which is, my work shows no relationship between osteosarcoma and fluoridation, even though he knew that his student had found the opposite of what he was telling them. He didn't tell them that.
That's terrible.
And he didn't tell the National Research Council, and he didn't tell his funders at the NIH that he had found this. And it was only when my son went to the rare books section of one of the Harvard libraries, acting on a tip-off, and found Bassin's doctoral thesis, that this came to light, that she had found this, not from the professor, but from my son going to the library. And then it was released to the press, and it was a bit of a scandal. Now, run the clock forward. She made that discovery. Her thesis was defended in 2001. My son found her thesis in 2005. In 2006, she published her work in a journal, a cancer journal. And the same issue of the journal, this is the politics now, is a letter from Chester Douglas, her professor. Very unusual this for a professor to pull the rug from underneath his graduate student, discounting her thesis, saying that his larger study would show that her thesis doesn't hold. Well, he promised that study for the summer of 2006. We waited and waited and waited for this study to come out. Meanwhile, various agencies in the pro-fluoridation countries like Australia and Ireland and England and Canada and the United States were using this promise of a study that would negate this study. The promise, which is unpublished and unpeer-reviewed study, is being used to negate her findings.
Really?
Her findings have been published. The notion that they would not hold were not published, but they used that, and then eventually Douglas's paper was finally published in 2011, and guess what? It did not refute her thesis. It did not show that in the larger study, young boys exposed in the 6th, 7th, 8th years did not have this increased risk of osteosarcoma, nor could their study have done it, and they must have known that from the very moment they issued this promise, because their biometric for exposure was bone samples.
But why would they do
this? As far
this?
as the bone is concerned, you only get those at autopsy or biopsy, long after this short period of 6th, 7th, and 8th years. I mean, it's not like you're cutting a tree down and looking at the rings. When you measure the level of fluoride in bone, that's cumulative. That tells you how much fluoride the kid has got by, say, the age of 20. It doesn't give you any indication of what the exposure was for 6th, 7th, and 8th years. So here was a lousy study, promised for 5 years, used by all the promoters. So, I mean, there's so much horrible, disgusting politics in this. It just makes me want to cry.
I feel you, sir. We feel the same way here in Milwaukee. It's absolutely true. You spoke about the health damages that occur from taking fluorosilic. And one question I want to make sure I get in. Where does this fluoride come from, and then what are the damages to the body? But first off, when you said pharmaceutical grade versus the other grade, where do they actually obtain fluorosilic acid?
Okay. Right. Okay. Very important, this. The fluoride that is used in dental products, whether we're talking about toothpaste, mouthwash, varnishes, or whatever, that fluoride is pharmaceutical grade. It's as pure as you can get. Like any drugs, you don't want contaminants in the drugs. Okay. The fluoride that they use in the drinking water is derived largely from the wet scrubbing system of the phosphate fertilizer industry. The wet scrubbing system is to collect the pollutants that would otherwise damage the environment, which they did for many, many years.
But we can drink them. It's okay to drink them, right? You just can't throw them in the lake, but we can drink them.
It's worse than that, Michael. It's worse than that. They can't dump this crap into the sea by international law.
Right.
It's far too concentrated to dump locally, but if someone buys it from them, it stops being classified as a hazardous waste. It becomes a product. And it's on this basis that they are adding a known industrial waste product, a contaminated waste product, into the drinking water. And let me tell you something which is absolutely precise and very clear-cut. One of the contaminants which shows up in the analysis of the bulk materials is nearly always arsenic. Arsenic. Now think of that for a moment. We are adding a substance to the drinking water which is known to contain arsenic. Arsenic is a known human carcinogen.
Yes.
There is no safe level for a human carcinogen, according to the U.S. EPA, which means any exposure of the U.S. population to arsenic will increase the cancer risk, cancer rates.
Because it's bioaccumulative.
So, you can't even argue about it. I mean, it's a known carcinogen. You're adding a known carcinogen, and you don't have to, but we are. We're adding a known human carcinogen to the water supply, which will inevitably increase cancer rates in the United States. We can argue about how big or how small, but it's a ridiculous thing to do if what you're trying to accomplish is a small reduction in tooth decay, if that.
What about radioactive isotopes? I heard down in Texas that they found them.
Yep, that's another scary thing. The phosphate rock, which is the source of this process. This phosphate rock is treated with sulfuric acid to produce phosphoric acid, soluble phosphate, which is then used in fertilizer.
Right.
Well,
right.
the rock that is mined for phosphate in Florida is also mined for uranium. So one of the other contaminants in there, as well, several contaminants, is going to be the breakdown products of radioactive uranium. Again, trace amounts, and they will argue that by the time you've done dilution, it won't hurt you. But to me, that's not the point. You don't have to do this. It's a huge violation of the precautionary principle to knowingly put industrial waste chemicals into the drinking water.
It's the same for pesticides as well, though. We can't throw them away, but we can put them on our lawn and then let the rainwater wash them off into our rivers and streams, though, right?
Yeah.
That's the way they do it. Business as usual.
You know, one of the discredited environmental policies going back a number of years is the answer to pollution is dilution. People realize that was not a viable way to treat pollution because Mother Nature, bless her, concentrates, reconcentrates. After you've diluted, it reconcentrates. And that's the problem with the emissions from incinerators, where I got in 27 years ago. The shock was that dioxins, even though you can dilute them coming out of the stack of an incinerator, nature is there with fish and grazing animals to reconcentrate in dramatic form that pollutant. So the answer to pollution is not dilution, and the answer to a hazardous waste product is not to put it in the drinking water and not to flush it back into the environment, which is inevitably what's going to happen.
There's that bioaccumulative effect where the plants are eaten by the animals, and the bigger animals eat the smaller animals, and eventually, you're saying by the time you get it, it's really concentrated. Is that what you're saying?
Well, in this case, the dioxins are slightly different because they concentrate in the fat, and there's a very clear magnification as you go up the aquatic food chain or the terrestrial food chain with one animal, if the material is not easily metabolized, not easily got rid of, then it's going to get more and more concentrated up the food chain. Now, in the case of fluoride, it concentrates largely in the bone.
Okay.
And our concern here, in terms of the human diet, is any food that has bone in it, like mechanically deboned meat. You can't see it, but when you mechanically debone meat, little chips of bone which you can't see, which will be in the final product. So things like chicken patties, hamburgers, chicken broth, etc., made from these products have fairly high levels of fluoride in, and fish have high levels of fluoride in their shells and bones and so on. And so that's of concern there. That's where the food chain gets us. But in terms of the human being itself, when you're very young, about 90% of the fluoride in babies accumulates in the bones because the kidneys are not working properly, not getting rid of enough. In children, about 50% accumulate. In adults, about 10%, we think, is concentrated in the bones. And then as the adults get old, their kidney function tends to break down, and they start to accumulate more fluoride. And that's of concern. When you know that, let's say on average, 50% of the fluoride that you take in each day goes to your bone, we have a huge amount of experimental data in countries like Mexico, Iran, India, and China, particularly India, where fluoride has literally damaged the bones of millions of people. We have a condition called skeletal fluorosis. We have areas which are endemic for fluorosis because they have higher than normal levels of fluoride in their drinking water. So there's no mystery here. We know that fluoride damages health. The only argument about is whether at 1 part per million, which is the level you add in, 1.1 parts per million is the level you add in Milwaukee, whether that will damage health. But there's no argument that fluoride damages health. And as far as the bones are concerned, the first symptom of fluoride poisoning of the bone, which is skeletal fluorosis, means poisoning of the skeleton. The first symptoms are just like arthritis, stiffness of the joints, pains in the joints, pains in the bones. And there are millions of Americans that have some form of arthritis. It's something like 1 in 3.
What about young people? The young people, they didn't used to get arthritis years ago, did they? Or are these arthritis-like symptoms?
Well, they might have had some forms of arthritis because there's some different causes of arthritis. But if you're as an adult, say to your doctor, supposing you get diagnosed with arthritis, and say, well, doctor, what's causing that?
Yeah.
He says, we don't really know.
Oh, yeah.
But we think it's got something to do with aging.
Uh-huh.
Well, what else has to do with aging in the United States? And the answer is how long you've lived in a fluoridated community, how long you've been ingesting and putting fluoride into your bones. And guess what? We've known about this for at least 70 or 80 years.
Oh, that's horrible.
But that fluoride could do this. And yet, there's never been a single study in the United States to investigate if there's a relationship between the amount of fluoride that's been ingested over your lifetime or the amount of time that you've spent in a fluoridated community and whether or not this is related to arthritis. Never looked at it. If you don't look, you don't find. The absence of studies is not the same as absence of harm. But that's what's being assumed. Oh, we've been fluoridating for 50 years. We don't see any. 60 years. We don't see all these things that Dr. Conant is talking about. Well, if you don't look, you don't find. What about a relationship between... we know that fluoride was used to lower thyroid function. Doctors were doing this in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. What about looking to see if there's any relationship with the epidemic of underactive thyroid gland in this country and, again, exposure to fluoride? Haven't done it. Haven't looked. We have at least 26 studies. As I said before, we're getting more studies translated from China, but there's at least 26 studies which show an association between fluoride exposure, modest fluoride exposure, and lowered IQ. Now, all the authorities in fluoridated countries, whether you're talking about Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, England, Canada, Israel, Malaysia, Singapore, all they do when you bring these studies up about lowered IQ is to challenge the methodology, point out weaknesses in the methodology, which is fair enough. It's very easy to poke holes in epidemiology, but why don't these people with this superior understanding of epidemiology, why the dickens don't they go out and do their own studies? Why are there no IQ studies in England, no IQ studies in Canada, no IQ studies throughout the United States, no IQ studies in Australia, only one small one from the 1980s in New Zealand? Why are they not attempting to reproduce these studies which have caused harm? And the answer is simple. It's politics. They are more interested at this point in time in protecting this practice for some reason, and I won't go into what the reasons are, than to protect the health of the American people. And the thing which I find absolutely disgusting in this is that we have paid civil servants. We are paying their salaries. We, the citizens, are paying the civil servants that work in the regulatory agencies' salaries, and they are spinning the science. I can't think of any justification for a civil servant who's meant to be serving the public and protecting our health spinning the issue. Why do they go before the public and only give the one side of this issue? Why don't they at least tell them that there are these studies out there and they're not conclusive, but that you should be aware of it? Why aren't it's unbelievable to me. Like, you have the chief dental officer of Wisconsin testified before Jim Bowles, that council, the subcommittee hearing last week. That was spin. All he gave us is spin. Well, fluoridation is safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective.
Right.
If he doesn't say that, incident, he's going to lose his job.
Good propaganda is simple and direct, and it speaks to the ignorance of the people. Yes. And that's what he's spewing, is propaganda. I would love to ask you, I mean, I know you just said you don't want to get into this, but What agenda? Who is bringing this down upon us? Who's paying the payrolls for these guys to keep them in the dark? And why?
Well, I would look at that at three levels. First of all, there are very few people that are actually running this show.
Yes.
Number one.
Number one.
And we'll get to that in a moment. But when you're looking at a bureaucracy, or the chain, I would prefer to call it the chains of command. There are two chains of command that work together to push fluoridation in the United States. One chain of command is headed up by the American Dental Association, a trade association for dentists. And the other organization that heads up the chain of command is the Center of Disease Control, the Oral Health Division.
The CDC.
And they work very closely together. The American Dental Association and the Oral Health Division of the CDC. They have conferences together. They share propaganda together. Anyway, you've got these two chains of command. Okay. Now go to the bottom of those two chains of command. You've basically got, at the very bottom, you've got your doctors and your dentists. What's the problem with them? I have no problem with them.
Okay.
Many of them are true believers in fluoridation,
yes,
because essentially it's the only thing that they were taught at dental school, that fluoridation was the best thing since sliced bread at dental school,
yes,
and
right,
medical school. And now that they've graduated from those entities, they don't have time, like I do as a retired professor, to read all the literature. So they simply take what they're told, the mantra from their professional bodies and from the CDC, fluoridation is safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, and the people opposed to this are a bunch of Looney Tunes. So that's what they go around thinking. And until they find a lot more time to actually read my book or look at some of the other materials on our website, fluoridealert.org, they're going to continue in that way.
What's the name of that book?
The Case Against Fluoride.
By Dr. Paul Conant.
Three scientists wrote that. Myself, I was the lead author, a chemist. You have Dr. James Beck, who's a PhD physicist who also holds an MD. He's a doctor as well. And you've got Professor Spedding Micklem from Edinburgh, Scotland, who's a PhD or Doctor of Philosophy of Biology from Oxford.
And we can get that book off your website, fluoridealert.org.
No, get it from Amazon.com. That's
Amazon, okay.
Thing to do. Yeah, they're quick, and I think there's probably as cheap there as anywhere else.
One more time,
and
the title of
there's
that book?
80 pages of references to that book.
And the name of that book, one more time for the listening audience?
The Case Against Fluoride.
Ah, okay, write that down.
If people want to inform themselves, the quicker way of doing it, I mean, the book is there for backup. The book is basically the book is for citizens, to let them know you go out and oppose fluoridation because it's a stupid thing to do. But please, with this book in hand, you're never going to be embarrassed, because there's solid science behind that opposition. You may want to oppose it simply because you don't believe the government has the right to force medication on people through the public water supply. And that's a very solid argument right there. But if you want to feel that you're on secure grounds, you have that book. And you also have the knowledge that after 19 months, the promoters of fluoridation have not come up with a scientific response to the book. They're doing what they always do, which is to ignore us. Ignore.
Cowards.
Refuse to debate, refuse to answer our questions in writing, and refuse in this case to come back with a scientific analysis. They can answer their own questions. They simply can't answer our questions. Okay, let's go back to those chains of command.
Please.
So we've got the doctors and dentists at the bottom of the chain here, who in the case of the dentists are true believers. It's something they're very proud of, fluoridation. Okay, it's their contribution to public health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the middle level. You have the middle level bureaucrats. And what a bureaucrat learns very quickly in our regulatory agencies is you don't challenge policy. You don't challenge policy if you're interested in promotion or keeping your job, because the moment you challenge policy, you're seen as a troublemaker. Your job is not to question policy. Your job is to enact it, to promote it.
Do you get your license pulled if you challenge them?
Well, some dentists have suffered nasty reprisals. some science researchers, some government officials have been fired when they question fluoridation.
Ooh.
I mean, Phyllis Mullinex was the chief toxicologist at the Forsyth Dental Center. She was the chairman of the toxicology department at Forsyth.
Right.
And she published a book which shows that fluoride accumulates in the animal brain and changes behavior, which has since been verified about 100 times, incidentally.
Changes behavior?
And she was fired and told that her work was no longer relevant for dentistry. That happened in 1995. And then you've got a fellow at the EPA Water Division, Dr. William Marcus. He questioned the peer review process, which downgraded some of the cancer results in an animal study, and he was fired. He was later reinstated for false dismissal and with back pay. But it shows you, and many dentists and some doctors say that they agree with us in private, but are too frightened to come out in public because they're frightened of the peer pressure that's going to be exerted on them, possibility of licensing. In Canada, it is very clear. The College of Dental Surgeons made it very clear. The Royal College of Dental Surgeons in cross-examination said if a dentist spoke out against fluoridation and a member of the public complained about that, they would be up on disciplinary hearings. So there's no question that if you're a dentist, you're expected to promote this practice, and if you don't, you're suspect. In fact, the American Dental Association put that into writing in 1979. They said, and I'm quoting almost word for word here, dentists need not be familiar with the scientific literature on fluoridation to be effective proponents. And if they fail to promote fluoridation, it is overt neglect of professional responsibility. That's almost word for word. So here, it's a very strange definition of professionalism.
It is.
That you don't need to be on top of the science to be an effective participant in the promotion of propaganda machinery. And if you don't do it, you're not living up to your obligations as a professional.
So this is
very Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we went down the rabbit hole just recently. This is institutionalized quackery, then.
Yep. Well, at the top now, this is kind of a long way around, Michael, to answer your question. So what's the motivation at the top? The people in the middle want to hang on to their jobs.
Right.
Okay, that's simple. They want to go. The people at the top, I think, and this is the conjecture now, this is conjecture, take it or leave it. Personally, I believe that they have promoted this for so long, they've waxed so eloquently on its behalf for so long, that I think they now believe that if they admit that they were wrong, they're going to lose credibility.
Oh, yeah.
And that translates into losing the public's trust. And that translates into threatening other public health practices. So what you might be seeing here is one of the situation as old as the hills. The end justifies the means. You have a good end. You want to protect your credibility. You want to protect all your programs designed to help public health. If you lose fluoridation, the one that you put on the crown, if you lose that, then the public's going to start raising questions about other public policies, and it doesn't take you long to work out what one of the top ones might be, and that is vaccination.
Oh, wait, right. Definitely vaccination.
If you get to vaccination, you're looking at a multi-billion-dollar interest.
Right.
And that may be why we're seeing this long, drawn-out defense for fluoridation to delay the day of reckoning on vaccination.
Well, that day must come.
Other public health programs.
That day must come. That day must come. The people listening today, look, the lie is being exposed. It's a paper tiger, folks. All you have to do is poke around, just find a little bit. Listen to what Dr. Conant is saying. We can bring this thing down. We can change it. And if it disrupts this status quo, so what? Obviously, they are not protecting our best interest as a public, but we as the public, We can't rely on the leaders. As followers, we must take this upon ourselves to say, no, we're going to listen to what true experts like Dr. Conant are saying, and we're going to stop this practice. Let it fall. Let it all fall. Go ahead, sir.
Well, look, look, Michael, before they don't have to accept everything I'm saying at this point. This is a simple common sense thing. You've got two very strong armies for and against fluoridation. Okay, which one do you trust? The other side says, trust us, we've got authority, we're the government, we're your professional bodies. But I say, which of those two sides is prepared on any day, in any place, to go on a public platform and defend this in open public debate?
Right.
And our side is the only side that will do that. I will go anywhere to debate this with anybody that's pro-fluoridation. And for 16 years, almost completely denied. So that's one of the things that the citizens of Milwaukee say. If it's as clear-cut as the editors of our local newspaper have said, then get those experts in whom you trust to come to a public meeting in Milwaukee and defend their position with the discipline of having the other side present. And I pledge to come back to Milwaukee to do that if they can come up with experts, any experts from throughout the United States, from throughout the world, put them on a public platform and defend this against us.
Well, Dr.
And I can...
I'm sorry, Dr. Conant, let me take that challenge upon me, and I'm going to hunt down for somebody, anybody in this city that is willing to stand on the other side, put their name to it, and bring up the evidence that will refute your truth and fact. So that's definitely, I'm going to make phone calls. I'm going to say, are you willing to put your evidence and reputation on the line to debate Dr. Conant here in Milwaukee? Let's do this like an MMA match. Let's try to promote this thing.
Please, Michael, do me a favor.
Yes, sir.
Would you make careful notes?
Yes, sir.
Make a note of the day and the time that you phone these people or write to these people. Make a note of what they say, and maybe a month or so from now, let's have me back on the program.
Oh, yeah.
And you discuss with me what the response was to this challenge to debate.
Yes,
and one other
this is
thing
great.
I would
Yes,
throw
sir.
out there to your listeners, and again, thanks for doing this.
Yes, sir.
One other thing I would throw out there is if they go to a web page, they can watch a 28-minute videotape. So if people have been intrigued by this, they don't believe me right now, but if they're intrigued, rather than read a book, which might take a few days or a few weeks, go to our web page and watch a video. It's 28 minutes long. It's called Professional Perspectives on Water Fluoridation, and it features 15 scientists. It includes a Nobel Prize winner. It includes 2 former risk analyzers from the EPA. It includes 3 members of the National Research Council, which reviewed this subject for 3.5 years. It reviews some prestigious people from the UK that are well known, and includes a Nobel Prize winner. I think I mentioned that. So in 28 minutes, they go through the 10 basic reasons why fluoridation should stop. And if you can't give 28 minutes for this to investigate one side of the issue, admittedly, in 28 minutes, and what you find is with people like myself, you look for our agenda. I have no axe to grind here. I've had a horrible amount of discomfort over the last 16 years. Trying to get this. I thought it was going to take a very short time when I read the science. It's taken a horribly long time. It depresses the hell out of me. It's changed my attitude of what makes this country tick and the role of science in public debate and so on. It's completely disillusioned me in terms of the integrity of our government when it comes to issues, controversial issues like this. Integrity only really gets examined when the issue becomes controversial. You're not exercising much courage to take a position on an issue which is clear-cut. But when the issue is controversial, then it does take some courage to come out on one side or the other.
Yes, it does.
And I just, the integrity is lacking here. There's no integrity at the Oral Health Division of the CDC. There's no integrity at the American Dental Association. And you can keep going down the list. And that's pretty sad. I mean, I'm not happy to say those things. I'd much rather have somebody to believe in when it comes to science on controversial issues.
I would, yes. Definitely. Yeah. Well, we're putting that challenge out there to the city, to the world, anybody. I don't care. You could be in the nation. This is a worldwide broadcast. Please, you think Dr. Conant, you can refute his information? We're going to find you. We just need one person to come forward and take the other side, other stance. It's amazing.
Well, let me up the ante on that challenge,
yes,
because
sir.
This isn't going to be easy, Michael. Let me explain. Back in 2003, I got a phone call from the U.S. EPA. They said, we are having the annual science fair in Washington, D.C., and each year we have a debate. And this year we'd like to have a debate on water fluoridation. Would you participate in that debate? I said, yes, I would. Straight away, I said, yes, I'd participate in a debate. They spent the next 5 weeks trying to find one expert in government or in any of the professional bodies, any of the promoters of fluoridation, to come and debate me in Washington, D.C. They couldn't find one single expert in North America to do that.
Well, if that's the case,
and so in the end, I just ended up giving a presentation.
If that's the case, then we'll leave it like that. I mean, if you get in the ring and you show up, you got your gloves on, and nobody comes in there, we're just going to pronounce you the winner. I mean, that's it. Just by default alone. If nobody in the government, in the ADA, in the MDA, the FDA, the EPA, hell, we'll take the World Health Organization. Anybody can come forward.
Yes.
And they won't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, you if you didn't know the science of the issue, their very behavior makes you very, very suspicious. You don't have to intimidate people. You don't have to twist people's arms. You don't have to refuse to debate on something in which you are proud, something that you think is very, very good, and something in which you feel the opposition is extremely weak. You would grab the opportunity to debate. I mean, I would.
I would too.
If I was very, very proud of a particular practice and I saw it being challenged, I would be the first to run out there and say, I'll debate you. Come on, give me your best arguments. But the fact that they won't do that should make everybody suspicious. It should make the counselors suspicious.
Yes.
I did actually issue this challenge at the press conference that we had in the Rotunda on the morning, and in the evening, I issued the challenge again. Anybody, I said, you're going to hear these people, they're going to come through with enormous amount of confidence in this practice. Ask them to come back and debate me. Asked if anyone, no, there was nobody. Nobody came up to me after that meeting. I'll debate you. Tell me the place and time. No.
You know,
just as if I never issued that challenge at all. But good luck. Try, and let's talk about it.
I can't believe, I mean, really, if people are listening, just knowing this alone, that nobody will show up and debate this, it should make you feel suspicious about this. It should make you really question. But we know the reason why people don't want to question this issue. I think the majority of them, once you uncover this lie, there's a whole slew of other lies that just come tumbling down afterwards, don't they?
I think that's the problem. I think that's it. When you prop up one bad thing with another, and this is what brings down politicians is not the scandal. If you think about, if you go back to the recent scandals, it's very seldom that the act itself was sufficient to topple the career, say, of Nixon and Watergate. What toppled Nixon is he lied about it.
Okay, yes.
and in various sex scandals that we had in England. It's not the sex scandal itself. We can live with those. It's that people in high places have lied. And once that lie is revealed, and to prop up the lie, you have to, to keep on doing it. So when it does unravel, as Watergate unraveled, then, you saw not just one lie, but you saw a multitude of lies to protect the first lie. And so it goes.
Dr. Conant, I swear, I really thank you. It's amazing that how much support do you get? I mean, how many people are actively pursuing this issue besides yourself?
Well, hundreds, literally hundreds around the world. I mean, one of the things that we did when we formed the Fluoride Action Network back in 1990, in the late 90s, it was very clear to me that we had very good scientists and lots of activists fighting locally, and often they were successfully locally. But people weren't going beyond the local battles. They weren't trying to put the whole thing together and make a national or even a statewide, a national, or even an international network. And fortunately, this coincided with the time that Internet began to really take off in a big way.
Okay.
And with the Internet and emails, we've been able to bring together a wonderful coalition of people. Now, in the terms of the population, we're still a minority of people. We've had over 4,000 professionals calling for an end to fluoridation. But we're still a minority of professionals. Most people won't commit either way. But that's what keeps me going, is the people that I work with. When I meet these people, either fellow experts of one kind or another, or I meet citizens in communities where I speak, I look at them and I say, why are you doing this? Why are you coming to this meeting? Why are you giving up an evening? Why are you giving up a weekend for this conference? Why have you spent so many years fighting this? And I look, is it for money? Are you doing this for money? No. There's no one making a lot of money fighting fluoridation. Are you doing this to get power? Is this a secret plan to get elected to whatever? No. Nobody is getting into big public office because of their fighting fluoridation. What is the motive? And the answer is, the motive is you want the truth. You want to protect your children. You want to protect your grandchildren. You want to protect your community. But and people that put so much effort to do that, protecting their children, their grandchildren, their community, their country, protect the whole notion that science should be there to serve the public, not violate the public's interest. They're the best people in the world. And I've had that privilege of working with them, and that's what keeps me going. Otherwise, it's incredibly frustrating. But I should leave on a positive note.
Yes, sir.
Since October the 25th, 2010, and that was the day that Canada met its Waterloo as far as fluoridation is concerned, the people of Waterloo, admittedly by a small margin, won a referendum to take fluoride out of Waterloo's water supply. And that has started a sort of domino effect. And in the 18 months since that happened, we've now seen over 50 communities, mostly in the United States, some in Canada, and a couple in New Zealand, stop fluoridation. And the combined population of those 50 communities is over 3 million. And so 3 million people have been liberated from fluoridation in the last 18 months, and I think we're on a roll. I think you're going to see the number continue. Great. And if you could get it out of Milwaukee, that would be so big. That would have nationwide ramifications and worldwide ramifications. I can tell you this, if Milwaukee was to do this, within a few seconds, people in Australia, New Zealand, in England, in Ireland, in Israel, throughout Canada, throughout the United States, would be celebrating, would be jumping up and down, and it would be magnificent, and it would be really important for us, very important. And I can't tell you how proud I am of your your alderman, Jim Bowl. I mean,
we are too.
He didn't just fire off the from the cuff here.
No.
He spent 2 years researching this issue before he introduced that legislation.
Dr. Conant, thank you so much. We're going to take up that challenge. We're going to attempt to find somebody out there. If you'd like to come back on the show, say, a couple of weeks, a month or so?
Whenever you feel. I mean, I'm here. I'll do it whenever you need me. But I think it'd be best after you've had a real sincere effort to get somebody to debate me.
We will try, sir. We will try. I want to thank you for all your valuable information. Thank you for coming to our city and helping us with this cause. We're behind you, sir. We're behind Alderman Bowl, and we're behind anybody else in the world that's actually fighting this cause. It's very noble. Dr. Conant, thank you for your time.
Michael, before I go,
yes, sir.
Sorry, there's one incredibly important fact I forgot to mention. If you could squeeze this.
Absolutely, sir. Yes, sir.
It was a fact that when I learned this 16 years ago, it really just put the nail in the coffin of this practice as far as I was concerned. And that was the level of fluoride in mother's milk.
Mother's milk?
Now, mother's milk. Now, mother's milk, as you know, is baby's first meal. This is the meal that's designed to give the baby everything it needs. And as long as the mother is not malnourished, that meal is the best you can do for the baby. Okay, so when I looked at the level in mother's milk, it's incredibly low. It's 0.004 parts per million. So when someone says to you, oh, well, we're only fluoridating Milwaukee's water at 1.1 parts per million, you can turn around and say, and do you realize that's 275 times higher than the level in mother's milk? Do you realize that a mother or a father that bottle feeds their baby in Milwaukee is giving that baby 275 times more fluoride than nature intended?
No.
1 part per million is not small when it comes to fluoride.
Sir, that is a great point. That is a great point. I hope everyone heard that out there.
And if you lower it to 0.7, which to me is a pathetic compromise. I mean, that's no solution at all. But supposing you lowered it to 0.7, it would still be 175 times higher than the level in mother's milk.
In mother's milk, is there nothing sacred anymore?
It's reckless. It's reckless. I mean, when I saw that, I said, hey, who knows more about what the baby needs? The American Dental Association or Mother Nature or God or evolution? However you see this development of the constituents of mother's milk.
That is... Listen, folks, if you don't care about yourselves, care about your children, care about your pets, the pets are drinking the water too. They get kidney problems. They get the same sort of IQ reduction, the calcification of the brain, the pineal gland, correct, Dr.
And the same kind of bone damage.
And the bone damage.
Look at dogs with arthritis.
Dogs with arthritis. You know, look, I feed our pets always drink mineral water. We purify our water. That's fact. I wanted to mention that it's one of the quickest ways people can go out there. Get a reverse osmosis system. That'll do it, won't it, Doctor? RO?
Yeah,
does that work?
It's not all unfortunately, whatever you buy to purify your water, to get the fluoride out, make sure you get it tested with a lab. Make sure you get the company tells you what it should do. Make sure you get your water tested after you've put it in, and if it's higher than they say, then take the machine back.
What is it, 0.4 microns it should go down to? Is that sufficient?
I'm not in the business of selling equipment.
I'll research
I'm
that.
not going to go into this.
Yes, sir.
Just make sure the company will guarantee the levels that you will get and then have it tested. And if it tests above what they say, then go back and say you want your money back.
Indeed, sir. Indeed, sir. Again, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I just want to make sure that I had time to squeeze in any last bits of information that you might have or any points you'd like to make. But
I think the simplest and quickest thing that people can do, if they can spend 28 minutes or even half the time, I think watching half the video will probably be enough. But go to our website, fluoridealert.org, and make sure you spell fluoride right. It's FLU
Oh.
Not FLO, FLUO.
No, FLUO, yes.
Yes. So
It's the opposite of what you would think it would be. FLUO.
And you'll find, and I also want to tell you that come the end of this month, you should see a dramatic. My son has been working for months now, upgrading this site. We should get some pretty dramatic stuff there with translation of many papers from China and elsewhere. There's much. We've only looked at the tip of the iceberg so far. There's much more science to come.
And then
So go to their website. There's 10 arguments against fluoridation. That will fill one side of a piece of paper. There's 50 reasons to oppose fluoridation. That will fill about 6 pages. And then you've got the book. But then also you can watch online this videotape, professional perspectives on water fluoridation. 28 minutes long, 15 scientists, level-headed, down-to-earth, simple, easy to understand, and I think personally very, very convincing.
Can we still subscribe to your fan newsletter or emailer? The Fluoride Action?
No, anybody that emails us will get the bulletins that we send out.
Okay.
We obviously, anytime anybody wants to send a donation, that's fine. If you go to a webpage, there are 1 or 2 things they can get, like mugs, which says fluoride not in my water, bumper stickers, and all that kind of
good.
stuff, T-shirts,
People
all those
do
kind
it.
of things.
Yes, go there and get those things. Definitely.
Yeah, you can get anybody that wants regular bulletins on this can get them from us, and just sign up online and we'll send them to you.
You know, sir, they will. I hope that many people go and actually, it's fluoridealert.org, Dr. Paul Connett, and your book is The Case Against Fluoride, available on Amazon.com. Please watch his 28-minute video.
Yeah, and Michael, here's another little tip. Some people have told me, and sometimes in a rather embarrassed fashion, they said, I didn't have time to read your whole book, but I was able to go through your book very quickly by reading the summary. Each chapter has like a couple of paragraphs summary at the end.
Yes.
And it's just like reading about 10 pages, I guess, in total. You can go from one end of the book to the other, just reading the summaries of the chapters. And they said that was good enough for us. So again, the book is great. It's your final ammunition. You have this in your pocket to give you the confidence that you know that the other side has not been able to topple the arguments in that book. Our barricades remain unbreached by the proponents.
Excellent, sir. Excellent. Again, thank you for this, for your effort and contribution. Maybe one day our grandchildren will live in a fluoride-free society. We will have increased IQ, no arthritis, no brain problems. And our cells and organs will actually thrive and survive. And it will be because of people like you, sir.
And you, Michael, too. I mean, we need the media. I mean, I've never been so cognizant of the fact that if you don't have a strong media, if you don't have investigative journalism, you're very in danger of losing your democracy. And that fourth estate is really important to us. And I would say this. Hopefully, this may be my final statement today. You give me such a long time here. But,
oh, yes.
Ending fluoridation is as easy as turning off a tap. It's as easy as turning off the spigot at the waterworks. Unlike many other issues, I can think of many other issues out there, environmental health issues, global warming, ozone damage, deforestation, health issues, obesity, diabetic epidemic, and so on and so on and so on. And even when people want to do it, it's very, very difficult. But once you have the political will, you can turn off that tap and it's over, at least as far as fluoride in water is concerned. It's over. But to turn off that tap, you need the political will. And to get that political will, you need millions of people informed and millions of people organized. As I said in my presentation, we have to beat fluoridation one open mind and one community at a time. Do not expect much help from central government here, but we can get help from individuals and also from communities. And this is where programs like yours are so important, not just to inform people, but to motivate people to get out there and work on this. And if nothing else, I can't think of anything else to do, pick up the phone, call Jim Bowl and say, I thank you for doing what you're doing. How can I help? I'm sure he'll have something to suggest.
And you can find Jim Bowl, Alderman Jim Bowl's contact information on the Milwaukee.gov site. Just go there, Google Alderman Jim Bowl. It'll pull you right up. He's got an email. He's got a phone number. Yes, please get behind him. We need your support in all seriousness.
Yep. He's very rare. We haven't seen many legislators who've done this, who have actually done their homework, who've gone and spent 2 years researching the issue, then put in the money to get experts from Oregon, from Atlanta, from New York State to come and testify at the hearing. This is very rare. That public hearing, which went on for 7 hours, and incidentally, I was very impressed with the chairman. I thought he was excellent. I think he was firm, but I think he was fair. It was the first time I felt that I had plenty of time to say everything I wanted to say, and I thought that some of the counselors were very, very astute in their understanding, in the questions they asked. So I think you should be feeling very proud of Jim on the one hand, and also some of the other counselors and the chairman for doing something which is very rare in the United States. And I do feel that we opened a few minds. I was not surprised that they didn't just vote it down after that hearing. But I was very positively inspired by the fact that they were asking the right questions and they were doing their homework and exercising due diligence. And I can only think that it's just a matter of time before Milwaukee would do the right thing.
I sure hope so, sir. I sure hope so. And it's going to take the people getting behind it, like you said. We have to help. Sir, well, thank you again. We are coming up now to the actual critical moment where we really do have to sign off here. I want to thank you. We got a full hour and a half with you, and that really is
wonderful.
Definitely. Anytime. I'm going to put that challenge out there. We're going to try and get you somebody to get into the ring with. I think they're cowards, and they're not going to put their reputation on the line, but you, sir, are, and we thank you. Dr. Paul Conant, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
Good day to you, sir. Goodbye. Well, there you had it, everyone. We want to thank him truly. This is incredible. I'm Michael Wordsworth. These were words worth listening to on Breaking Down the News, riverwestradio.com. We're going to pull out of here, station identification. We'll be back for 2 seconds, and then we're out of here. Again, please contact Alderman Jim Bowl. Go to the Milwaukee.gov site. His information's on there. Go to fluoridealert.org, watch his video, get Dr. Conant's book, buy their mugs, buy their T-shirts. That's how you can help. Throw some dollars his way. I mean, I'm sure it'll be greatly appreciated. As we pull out of here, we're going to have a quick break, and then we got another bit of comedy coming back up in the last minutes. We have a satirical version of an interview with David Rockefeller. I wanted to make sure I got that in today. I'll be right back. You're listening to riverwestradio.com. Once again, the Bilderberg meeting is happening today in Chantilly, Virginia, where many of Europe's top bankers and technocrats are gathering in secret to plan the global economy for the next 12 months. To get a deeper view of this, Breaking Down the News has met with David Rockefeller in Virginia. Mr. Rockefeller, thank you for joining us.
Yes, of course. I'm sure this is a big moment in your pathetic life as a news talk show host.
Now, do you prefer that I call you Evil or just Mr. Rockefeller or David Evil Rockefeller?
Ooh, that sounds good, yes. Call me David Evil Rockefeller. I like the sound of that.
Very well, Mr. Evil Rockefeller. Now, Bilderberg, the not-so-secret meeting taking place this week.
Now, hold on there a second. We are grateful to the Washington Post, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. But now, since the New York Times betrayed me, I would like to retract my praise for the cowardly media outlets that leaked our little get-togethers to the mainstream. Boo! Hiss! Hiss! It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries.
But Mr. Evil...
That's David Evil Rockefeller to you.
My apologies.
No, you should get it right. You're a reporter for Lucifer's sake.
Pardon me, David Evil Rockefeller.
That's better. Normally, we hate to be forced out of the shadows, but some fat bastard keeps blowing a bullhorn at my hotel room all weekend, shouting, "The answer to 1984 is 1776 or something like that." I mean, what the Hades does that mean? Well, this unruly blowhard has got the people all up in arms.
Well, yes, the people are revolting.
They most certainly are.
Pardon?
The people, yes, they are most revolting.
No, I meant the people are revolting against these secret meetings taking place now that the public has become aware of them.
Oh, that. Well, of course, but they don't pay attention. They don't listen. Most don't even know who I am or what I do.
That isn't true. Not of the young people these days. They don't see much of a future ahead of them because of men like you and the Bilderberg attendees. The younger generations are starting to really pay attention.
Ah, but that is exactly why I created Justin Bieber. Made him out of some spare parts I had laying around.
I would still say the tide is turning and the people are waking up to your corrupt technocratic system.
This present window of opportunity, during which a truly peaceful and independent world order might be built, will not be open for long. We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order.
All right, calm down, calm down. At this year's meeting of the Bilderbergers, you've got some big-time European heavyweights there. Dr. Joseph Ackerman, Angela Merkel, Herman Van Rompuy, all meeting with you to figure out what to do with the economy for the next 12 months. Now, if Greece is to leave the Eurozone, the rumor is that the Bilderbergs are panicking.
I don't think Greece is going to leave the euro. Germany doesn't want it to leave the euro, and Greece signed off on this memorandum with Troika, as it's called, which is effectively turning their sovereignty over to outside forces, and it's up to Germany, not the Greek people. They lost their sovereignty. I don't see that happening. It's not up to them. It's not their choice. Germany wants to keep Greece, to keep the euro cheap. If it wasn't for Greece, the Deutschmark would trade like the Swiss franc. It would be 20 or 30% higher, and their whole export model would crumble. Right now, Germany is making it out like bandits. They're making money the old-fashioned way.
By earning it?
No, by stealing it. Since the reunification of Germany, something that wouldn't have happened without the euro, Germany has become a superpower once again.
Basically, it's a leveraged buyout. All the assets of Greece are being taken by outsiders. And those are good income-producing assets like shipping, tourism, lotteries.
You are forgetting the gold mines. Don't forget the gold mines.
Right, gold mines. Those were privatized and sold off, correct?
Yes, approximately 111 tons of gold. I'm going to melt it all down and make little figurines of Justin Bieber that the kids can pray to.
But the IMF is bankrupt and they're lending money to Greece? They had to borrow trillions to execute a leveraged buyout.
Ah, but the real trick is getting the Greeks to sign on to this debt. Get it? We borrow the money to lend to them and then take over their sovereignty as we buy out their assets. It's brilliant, simply brilliant.
And then those assets go back to the IMF creditors.
They want the fees. Christine Lagarde says, just give me the fees. Give me my salary and you can rob the Greeks blind for all I care.
Evil, truly evil.
That is why I am called David Evil Rockefeller.
So it's like Mitt Romney when he was at Bain Capital. They just look for small companies and gut them. And in a like manner, Greece is just a small country that you can seize with a hostile takeover.
It is a Jimmy Goldsmith model, done on a bigger scale. Same thing. You pledge the assets of a country like Greece to secure loans to take over the country. Sell the assets, keep the difference, make lots of money. The people lose their sovereignty, their jobs, and I get to add another platinum-covered toilet in my horse stable.
So these Bilderberg meetings are a great way for you and the world's leaders to meet behind the scenes with no transparency and just basically decide the fate of any given economy.
Well, yes, and up until now it was a secret, but no matter. It was no coincidence that we took Ireland, Greece, Portugal, and then Spain in that order. This year, the big question is, where do we go next? France? Maybe UK is an interesting choice. It's similar to how you peasants buy houses, but we get entire countries for pennies on the dollar, you see.
The IMF, since the 60s, has preyed on Africa, then South America, then Southeast Asia.
Yes, well, while America was obsessed with Iraq, we were very busy taking over those regions.
But China threw you a curveball. They had a different model.
Well, China did good business, and that is inconsistent with Bilderberger policy. However, the U.S. can't really tangle with China because China is now the U.S. biggest creditor, and the whole thing is a sticky situation.
I would like to read you a quote from Bill Moyers about you. May I?
Ooh, yes. If it's about me, Mommy always talked about me, and I liked it. Talk about me, talk about me.
David Evil Rockefeller is the most conspicuous representative today of the ruling class, a multinational fraternity of men who shaped the global economy and managed the flow of its capital. Rockefeller was born into it, and he has made the most of it. But some critics see a vast international conspiracy he considers a circumstance of life and just another day's work. In the world of David Rockefeller, it's hard to tell where business ends and politics begins.
It is. It really is. Some days I wonder how history will look back on my takeover of the United States, and they will ask that very question and just don't know how I would answer even now.
So you admit that you want to take over the United States?
For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents, such as my encounter with Castro, to attack the Rockefeller family for inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it.
Wait, didn't you write that in your personal memoirs?
Ooh, you're a smart one, Mr. Wordsworth.
Well, thank you, I guess.
No, I hate that. Hate it. The second we gain control of America, people like you will have to go. And by go, I mean disappeared with black hoods over your heads. Now that is scary. You should be scared.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We're actually out of here now. Thank you for listening today. This was an awesome show. Peace out, everyone.